Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Elation Communications podcast on inclusive communications. Today, we will discuss from vision to reality, leading systems change through people first leadership. To learn more about Elation and our podcast, visit elationcommunications.com. I'm so excited today. We're joined by an exceptional leader who is helping organizations rethink how meaningful change happens. Our guest is Dr. Andrea Andy Thyrring. They are Executive Director of the Office of Education Solutions at Metropolitan State University of Denver. Andy is a nationally respected strategist, entrepreneur, educator, and executive coach whose work sits at the intersection of systems change, leadership, and organization transformation. Over the past 15 years, they have designed innovative programs, built sustainable systems, and guided mission-driven organizations through complex change initiatives that create lasting impact. With a doctorate in curriculum and instruction, Andy has led initiatives that have reached thousands of learners, helped secure and manage more than $8.6 million in external funding, and partnered with leaders across higher education, public health, philanthropy, violence prevention, and nonprofit organizations to turn ambitious visions into operational reality. What truly sets Annie apart is her ability to connect strategy with people. Their work is grounded in trauma-informed, equity-centered leadership and the belief that sustainable change happens when organizations invest equally in systems, relationships, and human potential. They are known for helping leaders identify the barriers standing in the way of progress and creating practical, collaborative strategies to move organizations forward. Today, Andy and I will explore how universities and mission-driven organizations can navigate change, strengthen leadership, build sustainable systems, and rethink the future of education and organizational impact. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Andrea Andy Thyrring. Welcome.
Hi, y'all. This is Andy. Jerrica, I'm so glad to be here with you and getting to hang out a bit. It's wonderful to be here today.
Yes, so we're so excited that you joined us. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join our podcast. So we said a lot, but tell us a little bit more about yourself.
So I've gotten to spend the almost all of my career working in higher ed. Outside of that, I get to run my consulting practice. And it's really built around a core idea that power shapes every system that we work in, whether we name it or not. The thread between the two is I work with people, teams, organizations who are really done with the surface level, right? And they want to get to the heart of the issue to make real change. Uh,
Mhm.
I am first and foremost an educator. I've spent almost 15 years working in and around higher ed, educational spaces, to make meaningful community change. I've done everything from teach sex ed to 6 to 19-year-olds. I've created trauma-informed and power-conscious prevention and advocacy units on college campuses, led an online program reaching over 2,300 learners. The list goes on. My real goal is really just to help folks bring their vision to life. It's all in service of building toward what I feel is my ultimate vision, right? A future where people don't hurt, whether that's at the hands of a system, an individual, or a social belief, even. I do exist outside of work. I promise I do like other fun stuff, not just
Mhm.
super nerdy things. I'm a somatics facilitator. I deeply believe in the power of resilience, body-based knowledge. I really see that as a powerful tool toward change.
So, in a time when organizations are navigating unprecedented complexity, we're very excited to hear your perspective about how to build sustainable change. So, let's jump into the questions. You've stated already, you often speak about moving organizations from vision to operational reality. What are the biggest barriers that prevent organizations from successfully making that transition?
Yeah. So it's funny. I've heard myself say vision a couple times. We're talking about vision. That's like the root of this question.
Mhm.
Uh, I was diagnosed with actually a degenerative vision condition. Basically, it means I'm losing my vision, right? It's super uncommon to be diagnosed with this condition in midlife. And to be honest, as somebody who was mostly able-bodied for the majority of my life, it's been hard to come to terms with that in all the ways that my life is going to literally look different. So, how I navigate the world has truly changed how I approach things and how I approach this change work. This very like literal vision is showing up in my practice. I can't rely on, what's surface level or obvious or visible. I have to ask questions. I have to sense into things. I have to make connections and move with intuition and intention. And those are usually the threads that are weakest, I've found, when it comes from moving an organization or a team from vision to operational reality. Most orgs miss the bus on not because their vision is wrong, but because they stay at the surface, which is very tempting. It's very common. We see the top issue, and that's what we want to address. What we need is alignment between vision and daily work, deeper than surface level, where we're moving beyond checkboxes. We can name what our value is, and we have the opportunity to ask questions. How does that value turn into a template, a process, a meeting agenda? How does it show up day to day? I think that sometimes maybe the fear to make the next right step can get in the way, but honestly, I'm seeing so much courage in organizations, in leaders, in the next generation. We can see a clear path forming, and I get to work with folks to move that forward and bring their vision into clarity.
That's good. Thank you, Dr. Thyrring, and for giving us a practical real life example.
Yeah.
I certainly can grasp with everything you just said based on that example. So,
Mm.
how can leaders balance strategy, systems, and relationships when guiding complex organizational change?
Absolutely. The interesting thing is sometimes it sounds like those are intention, but those three aren't
Hmm.
in tension. People just maybe feel like they are or treat them like they are, when the reality is strategy without relationship is a plan nobody trusts, whereas systems without relationships are just compliance.
Hmm.
We have this philosophy in emergent strategy, right? When we are thinking about making change, especially when it seems complex, we focus on critical connections more than critical mass. We don't need everyone on board. We need the right relationships and to make sure that those relationships are solid enough to hold the weight of the work, of the change. And then the sequencing matters. Relationships first, always. Relationships first, always. Because that's what earns you the right or the ability to introduce new systems. And
Hmm.
then new systems, because that's what it takes to make strategy survivable past our own tenure, past our own time, maybe in a position, or, if I'm the consultant, right, past my time with the team or the organization. Our relationship earns us the right to build the system in collaboration, and that connection has to come before we scale, or else that system really has nothing underneath of it. I think the system is what keeps the relationship from being the only thing holding everything up, but at the core, that relationship is essential to get the ball rolling.
Hmm. And so I love your emphasis on relationship. That is important to our inclusive communications podcast. So can we dive just a little bit deeper into relationship? Can you give us more context, right, on what is a positive relationship for leaders to achieve this type of organizational change? What should that look like versus what would be a negative relationship?
Mm. If I can jump into some of my content area, nerd area. And it
Hmm.
might even dovetail perhaps into our next question. And I hope that's okay that we jump ahead a little because I think this is a really great bridge. Uh,
Hmm.
when it comes to those relationships and like core tenets of those relationships, I truly believe that that must be trauma informed and equity centered. You mentioned that in my introduction today, that that's really a core of who I am, how I am. And it's one of my favorite things to talk about, actually. When we are trauma informed, we consider the whole person. When we are trauma informed, we consider not just who is here in front of us, but the breadth of experiences that they have had, that their community has had, that their generations preceding them have had, and their lived experience within the systems that we operate in. So it takes into the whole human context and looks at the whole person. And then when we're equity centered, we use that as a way to understand the context in which we live. So that's bringing in maybe some more of that public health element, understanding the context of where a person is coming from, or a team, or an organization. Uh, and that really informs the core of the relationship because it moves beyond transaction, right? It moves into person to person. What is their life? What is their whole story? And what is maybe the story that's underneath of the surface story, right? So if we're moving beyond that surface level, looking at what actually may need to be tended to in the process of building towards something better.
Well said. Yes. That is really the essence of inclusive efforts, whether it's communications, design, just all inclusive approach is really taking the time to get to know that other individual and in their entirety, really, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for taking time to define that. And could you give us an example specifically where you've seen how that has impacted good leadership?
Absolutely. Um, Given the nature of my work previously, so you mentioned that my background is in public health. I've gotten to do some great work in violence prevention and
Mhm.
working with impacted communities or impacted individuals. And there can be, when we are trying to meet a person, meet a team, meet an organization where they are, we come in with our own process. We come in with our own items, maybe our own objectives that we want to achieve, or perhaps even those objectives were given to us at the outset of the relationship and they said, this is what we need. I've gotten to see instances where, we go into the room and what rises to the surface is actually a deeper need for connection, for being seen, for visibility, getting to work most closely with uh, organizations or affinity groups to help better understand what it is that is going on in their community and how we can move them forward. And when we are trauma informed, we're able to see, the deliverable that we've been given. Maybe that's what's on paper. And when we connect person to person, when I'm in the room with these affinity groups, with these student leaders, with these leaders across campus, we can actually listen for what's underneath of that and
Mhm.
work together to implement trauma-informed practice, equity-driven practice, because that's really the root of what it is.
Okay, Dr. Thyrring, thank you. So you've already mentioned your experience in public health, education, violence prevention, philanthropy, and finance. What common patterns have you observed in organizations that successfully sustain change in these areas?
Absolutely. So I'll go back to emergent strategy, a little bit of a fan person for that as we think about ways to implement and move towards change. Um, the organizations and teams that sustain change move at the speed of trust. They move at the speed of the trust of their individuals, their teams, their stakeholders, their communities. Engagement and capacity building, I think, are introduced or included as part of the infrastructure of change, not just like an add on or a nice to have. Um, and that goes back to trauma informed practice. We have transparency, collaboration, opportunities for peers to share and build off one another's expertise to inform decisions. Kind of like what I was saying in my last example with the groups and the organizations, getting them to talk to one another and surface the true issues. And of course, at the heart of that is awareness of cultural and identity contexts. Those are the real pillars of trauma informed care, trauma informed practices.
Mhm.
And then the organization can look for opportunities to empower the voice and choice among their stakeholders, whether that's your internal groups, your community, your donors, your funders, your external stakeholders, your boards, whomever. This all contributes to a sense of trust and safety, and that is needed to move the work forward. And from there, we can really build toward capacity. Some folks are going to need more support or engagement than others. You're going to have early adopters, and then you're going to have your naysayers. You're going to have everything in between. Um, you meet people, when you meet people where they are, you can anchor the change in their shared values and build toward their capacity to engage with the change and move with you.
Mhm.
And that's where there's trust, clarity, community or stakeholder engagement. Then that change can begin to happen, but can only move as quickly as the community feels it is safe to do so. It can only move at that speed of trust.
Okay. So I love everything you're saying, particularly if we're looking towards systemic change, right? And
Mm,
um before we move on to the next question,
mhm,
essentially organizations, at least the ones I've worked with over the 20 plus years in my career, a lot of them are either some of them have deeper bureaucracies, they have been in existence for hundreds of years, and often you there's those organizations really have the greatest need for systemic change, but
mhm,
then it can create somewhat of a barrier for people to really have a good vision and belief that change can
mhm,
happen within those kinds of environments, right? So when
mhm,
we talk about systemic change in those types of settings where it just seems to be so deeply rooted and hard to change, um, where can leaders, visionary leaders begin in those kind of
mhm,
environments?
mhm. I go back to the importance of relationships.
Mhm.
I go back to the importance of knowing oneself, and I'll speak to
Mhm.
that. I'll go more deeply into that in just a moment. Relationships, deeply knowing oneself, and courage, I think. So, relationships really are at the core. If we're working within a system, an organization, a bureaucracy, whatever it might be, that could be small, it could be big, right? Relationships really can facilitate motion toward change. Is there somebody on a committee that we can connect with and talk with? Is there somebody in a leadership position that we can uh, help buy into our movement forward? Is there somebody who is a crucial lever for decision making that maybe just needs a little bit more information that we can share with them?
Mhm.
Conversely, is there somebody who has been in the system or within the bureaucracy for so long, maybe they themselves feel beaten down or they themselves feel stuck? What empowerment does that person need? So I go into even the relationships and the somatic side of my practice. What does their whole self need? Maybe they need some opportunity to engage in resilience, some self-care, some navigation forward. And through that relationship, we can make that possible and we can really leverage where we are at different points within an organization. When I'm talking about knowing oneself deeply, and especially for a visionary leader, there may be a lot of naysayers. There may be some folks who are critical or pointing out the cracks in our process forward. And some of these folks may be helpers, right? They're really helping us to strengthen where we're moving us forward. They also may just be challengers, and that's just the nature of the work. That's just the nature of the world. But when we know ourselves deeply and we are deeply connected to and committed to our vision, we have a clear sense of being able to make the best next step forward. We're able to say, this is in alignment with the vision. This is what my community is saying via my relationships, right? This is where the path is moving forward. And I'm going to stay committed to that and knowing that there is a North Star or something to align to.
Thank you. I mean, you just shared great strategies and just perspectives uh, to maintain hope, right? That you can be a change agent when it seems dim around
Yeah.
you, right? So thank you for that. Why is people first leadership not only the right thing to do, but also one of the most effective strategies for achieving organizational outcomes?
Totally. So, like, full stop, person first leadership is the right thing to do. Thinking of the people that we're working with, the people that we're working for, because at the end of the day, we are people, human to human, nervous system to nervous system, creating solutions, offering services, creating products, whatever we are doing in service of making change. Our current systems and hierarchies maybe like to keep us separate, right? They let us think that we're disconnected. We we have the opportunity instead to lead and model person first. It's the only effective leadership style, and it is, in my opinion, really the responsibility of the leader to do. And I obviously, that is aspirational. That's Andy's vision. From a business case or from the operational perspective for an organization, when we position our people first in our community, we inevitably engage better outcomes. Like that's just the natural byproduct. We meet people where they are, empower them into their genius. We reduce barriers. People feel seen, right? They catch problems earlier when they are engaged. They stay through the hard parts when they are engaged. And they tell you the truth when something isn't working. They don't have that fear or they don't maybe hold that close to the chest. They're really in it to iterate with you. When we lead with people, we get the outcomes anyway. They just come from a place that really doesn't cost a person their dignity to get there. And why not have both a better world and better outcomes?
I like that. A better world and better outcomes. It doesn't have, it can be both, not either or. And I thank you for that because I want to go back to some language you've introduced earlier about trauma informed. And, we unfortunately live in a world where leaders at the top of many organizations or just top seats are they're not sensitive to being to trauma informed strategies. As a matter of fact, they're kind of inflicting trauma. So can you speak to this in the sense of why should leaders be concerned with trauma informed practice or not?
Absolutely. When we are trauma informed leaders, we create environments where our team get to show up in all wholeness of their expertise and their wisdom, right? There are reasons why we bring people onto our teams. There are reasons why we bring people into change work. They have expertise, they have vision, they have skills. And when we are aware of the whole picture of a person, and that's even without knowing their backstory, right? Like, I'm not saying you and I need to sit down and we need to compare trauma notes. Like, I'll get my notes from my therapist. You and I can sit down and have coffee. No, that's not it. Uh, the trauma informed piece is the awareness that more likely than not, somebody has experienced something that's difficult, and it may or may not show up in the way that they show up to work. And when we lead from that person first perspective or team first perspective, community first perspective, we are trauma informed. We are aware of the fact that they're going to have a really great day and sometimes they may have a really bad day. And when a person has the flexibility and the autonomy and the agency to be their whole self, they're going to bring not only their whole self, but their whole effort into the work. So it creates a transformational work experience, right? Like we don't have to keep doing the work environments that maybe generations before us have endured. We can build something better.
Yes. So let's talk more about that. How can organizations build the internal capacity and even those environments that you're referencing needed to sustain transformation long after initiative or strategic plan ends?
Absolutely. So like there's the academic answer, right? Like I can put on my Dr. Andy hat and share about, the diffusion of innovations or public health models or adaptation of new attitudes. That really just boils down to leaders modeling the way,
Mm,
creating new norms or systems or practices, what have you, and a clear exploration of the what ifs that may or even likely inevitably will pop up. We look ahead. The biggest piece is not treating the process really though like a scout badge. We don't want to earn our badge of completion or to say our checkbox that we did it after implementing a new policy or a way of doing things or completing a grant or whatever the initiative might be. Um, and we don't call it a day at that point. We engage in, I guess I'll use an academic word, praxis, right? The reflection and action, the symbiotic relationship of reflecting and then taking action, reflecting and then taking action. The moment that we treat culture outside of reflection and action as something that we finish, that's really when we've stopped doing it. The
mhm,
work must be collaborative, scaffolded, invested in, and regularly centered or at least revisited, right? Until it just becomes an operational norm. That's just the way we do things here. And even then, we still have to pick it up every now and again, review it, make sure it is still accurate and reflective of the who and the how that we want to be. We continue to engage with it critically, regularly, um, and making sure that it is relational and iterative. Sustainability doesn't just live in a document. It is actually something that we do through a habit cycle. If it only exists on paper, then really it's just performance and not actual transformation. We engage with it through action.
Mhm. So this is high level leadership strategies. Thank you. We need to enroll in your class, Dr. Thyrring.
Sign-ups incoming.
So before we move on, I want to ask a question that came to mind.
Mm,
So these obviously are practical and theoretical, I'm going to say ways to implement and to guide organizational change.
mm,
And the question is, however, often change happens out of necessity, right? Not because someone's intentionally deciding, oh, today we're just going to try something new, right? They're
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
forced into that. So, how can leaders apply all that you've shared so far under that context when they're kind of reacting
yeah,
to some type of stimulus who's created the necessity to change? And I think of a contact that I've made recently, and their new CEO came started, and I think it's like a month later they lost all their government funding and had to revamp the entire organization. And it was really by necessity that,
yeah.
organizational change took place. So under those circumstances, which I know there are a lot of organizations in who are experiencing similar
Mm,
things, how can they implement all these good strategies and information you just shared today?
yeah. I first want to recognize for leaders who find themselves in that position, I first want to recognize probably the cascade of emotions and thoughts that come with finding themselves in that position,
Mhm.
right? We have the oh crap, lean back in the chair. What do I do?
Mhm.
I first want to acknowledge that because that is very much a part of a leader's experience. And when we are cognizant of the reality of the pool that we're swimming in, all of the different factors in play, we can work to identify tools and resources that will help bring us back into our mindset and our clarity. There's a reason why a leader is a leader, right? There is a reason why they were chosen to have the expertise to guide through or to lead the organization, whatever their role is. So when we soothe or address or calm the feeling, we can then remember we are not in it alone. Ideally, we're not in it alone. If a leader is finding themselves in a position where they don't have a team to rely on, maybe that's a whole different scenario, which would
Mhm.
require a whole different response. But we'll make the assumption that the leader is surrounded by a team who has expertise. They have somebody who knows about fiscal. They have somebody who knows about budget process. They know the HR, the chief of staff. They have all of these different folks who, are aware of the programs and the nuances. And the leader's role is to bring those folks in. Remember, going back to relationship, who is
Mhm.
on our team? Who is on our corner, in our corner to help us navigate this? Because I, as a leader, can only know things from my own, pardon me, perspective, right?
Mhm.
I can only know things from my own perspective. What I have is a wealth of expertise around me, and I can say, all right, here's the end goal that we need to get to. We're going to be trauma informed, we're going to be equity centered, and we're going to move at the speed of trust. What information do I need? What is immediate top of list? What are the red flags? Oh my goodness, if we don't talk about this now, doors are going to close, or whatever, like the catastrophic end is going to be.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, we address those. We develop a contingency plan. We gather data, we gather information, and then we say, okay, our best next step forward is this. And we're going to communicate it to our team, our organization, our community, our stakeholders, whomever the involved parties are. We're going to communicate it to them honestly, transparently, and with compassion. Because again, we are people first. When we
Right.
engage our people and we give them the supports needed to bring their whole self to work, which in this moment might be a little bit of panic, but we also resource them and empower them in the same way that we're bringing in our team to demonstrate their expertise. We bring in our people's, our communities' ability to bring in their expertise. Then, holy cow, we have this whole successful team. It's not just Andy as the leader, right? I have this whole successful team around me. And again, you're going to have the naysayers. You're going to have the people who pick apart. You're going to have the people who argue. And that might be just somebody's response. And we still move at the speed of trust, and we can trust and rely on the fact that we've got a whole center of folks around us. And we can often leverage and navigate our relationships to remain person first, person forward, and make the best next step, moving at the speed of trust.
All right, that's very insightful. Thank you, Andy. And
Mm,
actually, it's a great segue to the next question. So you've already discussed the role that communications plays. And so can we just take another look at how it helps navigate uncertainty and embrace change? Because essentially, that's kind of what we were just discussing. There's moments of uncertainty, moments of unplanned, unexpected, all of that. And how should visionary leaders continue to lead under those circumstances? And given that this is an inclusive communications podcast, I would love to hear your perspective on your expertise on how communication undergirds all of that.
absolutely. As you know, communication is everything, right?
Right.
It is at the core of how we show up. And maybe I'll take us through like a little thought exercise for a moment. Think back to when we were young, right? I'll use myself as an example. When I was a kid, I was afraid of heights. I don't tell everybody I still am desperately afraid of heights. But I also loved to swim. When it was summertime on summer break, I really wanted to jump off the high dive, but I was so afraid of jumping in the water because I thought it seemed so high up. Now, imagine you have a parent, an aunt, a sibling, a cousin, whomever saying, just get in the water, right? Am I going to do it? Yeah, maybe, right? Maybe I will jump in because I don't want to be yelled at. I don't want to look foolish. Maybe I'm afraid of looking bad in front of whatever. Um, but what if on the other side of that, they talked me through it, right? What if I was encouraged to take a deep breath? What if I was encouraged to look at them? They gave me instructions. They told me how high up I actually was versus the perception that I have from up on the high dive, which always seems higher than it actually is. What if they told me how to jump so I wouldn't get hurt? Because maybe that was one of my fears. What would it feel like when I hit the water? What they would do if anything went wrong? What if they reminded me how brave and capable I already was? This is supportive communication coming from someone trusted that makes big things possible. So that's like a really like cute walkthrough example, but we find that same thing can apply when we're working with others. Because the reality is, we're really all just big kids in grown-up bodies. We need communication to navigate uncertainty and to embrace something new or challenging. We're not going to get there without communication. And in fact, our tolerance for uncertainty goes up when people understand the reasoning, the context, the what ifs, not just the here's what we're deciding to do. Most change communication tells people what's happening, which is like good, right? Like you want to tell people what's happening. The version that can actually help a person or group or team hold that uncertainty considers their reality, helps them to be present, explains the why, again, some of that context, and affirms what will stay true while the specifics are still moving. So it gives them a more stable environment around them. It also leaves room for people to have different stages of change. So, like I mentioned, like some of the academic frameworks and whatever, it allows them the room to move through their own experience, have different reactions and actions, different levels of support, all while still communicating what the clear process is, what the expectations are, and how we'll get through it together. That's how we're trauma informed and equity centered in that process.
Wow, you gave a powerful example. I love that. And yes, you just really brought that home for us. And I love you, especially when you said if we can tell people how brave and capable they are. I mean, yes, I love that perspective. So, as we wrap up, when we look towards the future, what gives you hope about the next generation of leaders working to create more equitable and effective systems?
Yeah. As an educator, I do have the privilege of seeing our next generation of leaders and the folks who are visionary and who are looking to see what comes next. I love how they are thinking differently. There is a felt sense for what is possible, right? And what inherent processes or conditions must exist if we're going to challenge our systems or build new systems, and what can really just be created because we have the idea. Think about all the technology and platforms that we're being exposed to. What can become possible? Working with this generation of up and coming leaders, I get to understand the people, the process. I get to uncover what's actually needed, work with them to build the systems to scale. Um, Real human judgment and lived expertise becomes more valuable, and getting to see how they apply their own is really empowering and uplifting. We really certainly do have plenty to work with on our plates right now. And I'm excited to work with the next generation of leaders on what things can look like. They, the ones who are really giving me hope aren't the ones that have like the fastest answers necessarily. They're the ones asking what's actually needed and then start building because they can see what's possible, even if maybe we can't just yet.
Mhm. That's wonderful, Dr. Thyrring. Well, thank you for the work that you're doing to shape the next generation. And for anyone who might want to consult with you and your utilize your expertise in helping them move organizations forward, how can they get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So I can be reached via email or LinkedIn. Happy to find me either way. I check both regularly. I also have my consultancy, Insight Consulting. Yeah, reach out, LinkedIn, email, hit me up.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thyrring. What a wonderful talk today. You definitely challenged us to see things differently and to be real and authentic about being change agents in organizations. We hope to have you back sometime soon.
Yes, I would love it. Would love to hang with you anytime.
Uh, Thank you. Thanks again. And thank you, listeners and viewers, for tuning in to this episode. You can follow Elation on Instagram, Twitter, and Threads at Jerrica Talks, on YouTube at Elation Communications, on LinkedIn at Elation-Communications, and on Facebook at Elation Comms. And until next time, become an inclusive communicator. Thank you.